guys, what's going on, and welcome back to an episode of Conqueror's Blade. So today, the Maul. So I've been playing the Maul for a while now, since it got unlocked. Obviously we've had all the unit challenges that go along with it. You know, first the first set of 4, which give you basically unlock the bulk of the abilities, and then you go on to basically the 2 of the ultimates. I've been going down the Paragon 2 with the strike and grapple, since obviously that's kind of the one that's the most relevant at the moment, it's the most controversial one, and it's also the better one. I've still got a little bit to do on the Paragon 1 version, but I'm not using either Maelstrom or the Forges of War, so it's not really affected me too much. So I want to kind of break this video down into 2 separate parts, really. For the first part, I just want to talk about the strengths and weaknesses of the Maul as a class, kind of have a look at some footage, play a little bit, but I'm going to leave aside, really, the bulk of the strike and grapple stuff, and I'm going to cover that one sort of halfway through or towards the end of the video, because I want the first half of the video just to be looking at the Maul as a class. Is it any good? What does it do well in, etc., without kind of all the controversy of, you know, is the strike or grapple a good or a bad thing? Yeah, it's certainly not the most amazing thing ever. It's certainly a little bit annoying when you get caught by it. But so that's why I want to cover that in the second part of the video. So initially, we're just going to focus on the Maul as a class. So we're over now in, obviously, the skills tree, and I want to talk about the ones I've been using and kind of how I came to this sort of conclusion. So obviously, the most obvious one is Mighty Maul. Now, pretty much everyone's going to be using this for a couple of reasons. Well, it actually gives you a pretty handy little sprint. I've certainly got out of a few sticky situations more than once with it. But the main thing is it allows you to then use a charge ability immediately afterwards at full charge without having to charge it. So, for example, I use mine with Bonebreaker. So if I activate Mighty Maul now, a bit of a tongue twister, and then immediately activate Bonebreaker afterwards, I no longer have to charge this up for over 2 seconds. It is instant following Mighty Maul now. So that's why this as a combination works so well. So that's why I think most people are going to go for Mighty Maul now. Then, personally, I like the Bonebreaker the most. I think this is the highest damage one that's currently available. But it does have a couple of drawbacks. I mean, in terms of its advantages, yeah, as I say, I think it's the highest raw damage, combined with the fact it's unblockable. That means it's really effective against units. It's also pretty effective against enemy heroes. It just puts out a ton of damage in a really quick succession. Combine that with the fact that normally if you time it right and you hit initially with the Mighty Maul, now you cause a little bit of a shoulder charge, which causes a stun, and then you at least get the first couple of hits in, which normally causes a little bit of knockback as well. So you end up being able to lock heroes in place pretty well with it, unless they can sort of, you know, break out of that stun and get far enough away, in which case you then can't catch them up again. You also get directional control over it, so that means you can pan around in a circle, left, right, forwards, backwards. You know, you can decide which way you want to go. You can angle yourself, so it gives you an element of control. But on the downside, it does drag you forwards. As you can see kind of in the little clip here, as you swing it, it basically pulls you forwards and sort of through. So it can be a little bit dangerous in terms of getting pulled deep into enemy units, particularly when you're kind of on the back foot and being pushed back a bit. I found myself more than once deeper behind enemy lines than I really mean to be, and then of course it ends and then you die. So yeah, generally my favourite one can be a little bit dangerous in terms of dragging yourself forwards. Beyond that, I might be a little bit different to some people here. I've gone for Uku's Doom. It kind of feels like a little bit of a waste in a way, because it's just like a very short little bonk on the head. I mean, that's really all it is, but it has 2 important effects. It removes dazed effect from you, and it causes knockback on enemies. It doesn't do a great deal of damage, you know, a little bit. I mean, it's not a bad thing, but it's really not a very damaging ability. But it gets you out of situations. It's got a really short cooldown, 8-second cooldown. And that little stun, it interrupts enemies' abilities because it's such a quick acting ability. You're stun locked and you're spamming the R key, well, R key in my case, then more often than not you can get this little Uku's Doom smack on the head in time before the enemy player can sort of continue their abilities. It's an interrupt. And when the Maul doesn't really have a great deal of CC or sort of stun locking or anything like that, then this becomes useful in my opinion. But equally, I know other people, some people prefer things like From Hell, which is more of a, it's kind of more similar to the Bectu Corbin from the Poleaxe, just a swinging ability. Or some people like to pair it with Maelstrom, which actually I tried at the second level, didn't really like, so that's why I've not really pursued down Paragon 1 so much. But for me, having that little bit of extra flexibility in terms of control was more important than the extra damage you get from another big ability. Particularly when I feel the cooldown on Bonebreaker and Maul is really quite low. I mean, that's a 12-second cooldown for an enormous 5-swing attack. You know, by the time you've even finished that, most of your cooldowns are over anyway because it's such a long duration attack ability. So for me, these two are my damage dealers, and this is my crowd control. Beyond that, obviously, strike and grapple. We'll cover this a little bit later on. Obviously, it's probably the most controversial one, a hero ability they've introduced for a while, because, you know, once you get caught by it, there's not really anything you can do. You're kind of along for the ride, literally. So we'll cover that one a little bit later and take a look at that bit later on in the video. So actually, let's hop into some footage now and kind of see in combat, see what sort of damage we can get with this, particularly against enemy units, because that's where I think this class is really the most effective. So for the first clip, we are kind of really pushing the final point now. We've got kind of close once before, got driven back, and I've just come back. I'm down to my final unit with these Imperial Spearmen, and I'm just trying to get stuck in. I noticed there wasn't a hero with these javelins, so I really wanted to go for them. And you see the amount of hero damage we can do against units is just really, really intense in this sort of situation. And then it's basically a case of using this sort of very heavy armour of the Maul to try and keep myself going, and trying to get my damage up with my abilities. You can see we are sort of dealing with 3 heroes at once, and because they're really short cooldowns on that Bonebreaker, I find it just works really, really quite nicely in this sort of situation. You know, it's got like a 12-second cooldown on Bonebreaker, and it's because it's such an effective ability and it can do so much damage, it's really quite nice to have it so regularly on cooldown. Anyway, we managed to survive, even if we don't directly kill too much. We did quite a bit of damage to those javelins, which I was quite pleased with, and we've got more allied support moving in. But I thought, well, let's just take the time to have a little bit of a heal, because I was getting pretty low on health. And then it's time to try and apply a bit of pressure again. Miss a little bit, and an enemy Maul ends up, a friendly Maul, sorry, ends up kidnapping him, so I didn't actually get to kill him. But we would have done. I'll be pretty confident. It does quite a chunk of damage in these sort of situations. We clear out the rest of the guys on the actual point, and then we're just dealing with what's left. Just trying to put damage against the enemy heroes. I got hit by a javelin volley and go extremely slow on my movement, which kind of slows me down a fair chunk. But our trebuchet goes in and gets us a good bunch of kills, and we clear out the point, and we're just trying to drive the enemy heroes back. And I think that's one of the areas I was really quite impressed with the Maul on, was the fact it actually does a lot more damage to enemy heroes than I expected, or that I found initially. Once you get the Bonebreaker, look how much damage we do against enemy heroes. Really, particularly medium heroes, chunk down their health super, super quickly. Even quicker than something like a poleaxe, I find. So that was something I was really quite impressed with. So on to the next clip. Again, a final point holding. I think it's because there's so many units in these sort of clips, I find it the Maul's really effective, because it can just really sort of lay about with the hammer and just do a ton of unit damage. So we were defending in this case. Enemy unit come across, just managed to get a good smack on him. You know, it's hits for like 3,000-4,000 against enemy heroes, so it's really quite nice in those sort of situations. Then I'm just pushing on, killing off these arch units. Nothing particularly special or clever here. Just pushing on, pushing around, and just sort of cleaning stuff up. I find in that sort of situation the Maul perhaps isn't quite as nice as a more flexible class. You are a bit slow. You can't really roll all that far. You know, there are nicer classes, I think, for that sort of situation, but as a downside, it's really not that small. And then, as we'll see in this situation, I think the Bonebreaker works quite nicely. The pull forward is a nice thing, because it pulls me through this musket unit as I'm attacking. And since it pretty much 1 or 2 hits everything, then I think it works really nicely. I love how that hero goes flying when it gets hit. We go for a little bit of a grapple here, just because I had one available. I mean, this is where, you know, the grapple is a bit crazy in that sort of situation. Although I suspect that hero probably would have been dead anyway. And then it's pushing through. I was going to return back to the base, but I thought I'll have a quick heal in this alleyway. I should be, you know, relatively safe here. Go for a little bit of a heal up, and then I'm thinking, right, I'll push back onto the base point, make sure we keep the base full, because we've still got 4 minutes to go on this match. But as we come around the corner, I saw these men-at-arms, undefended, and yeah, this is where the Maul is truly crazy. The amount of damage we do, and we basically wipe out this entire heroic era unit in really, really quickly, and really the Maul, my hero class, did the vast bulk of the damage in that situation. That initial hit, you know, hit every single unit in that stack and did a good chunk of damage. No other class can put out that sort of level of damage in such a short period of time, and that's where, you know, the Maul is really impressive. And when you can start hitting units, I know these are lightly armoured units in this case, but by and large it applies across all units because almost all units have this weak blunt armor defense. And you can start hitting units for 4, 5, 6,000 damage, and that's really crazy, and you can sort of kill units in a couple of hits. And it's that unit damage that I think makes the Maul a fun class to play. And I think once you combine that with Molnar to get that little bit extra momentum, to cut out that charge up and, you know, enables you to conserve your stamina a bit more, then I think it becomes a very fun class to play. And quite a powerful class, certainly a lot better than I initially found it, because I struggled quite a lot with the start of the class. You can see here, I mean, even though I get a little bit carried away, drag myself a bit too much into the formation, and we get a bit overwhelmed by heroes, even against those Condottieri, we knock down a huge chunk of them. And I think I actually managed to get myself away. I used my Molnar just as a sprint, and I'm able to sprint back around the corner with, like, basically no health at all. I managed to get myself healed up. So then, it's the carry. You know, this is the one bit I dislike about them all. I think they've overdone it. The carry distance is just too long. And because it's something that enemies who get caught by it have no control over, once you're caught, that's it. You know, you're completely out of control. You lose all control of your character. And even when I've not really got anywhere to throw him, you know, it's still very frustrating for the enemy hero. So I wish they kind of hadn't done that quite so much. I think the actual ability itself can be fine, but I don't think it needs such a long carry distance, because it's just really, really, really far too far that it carries enemies. So hopefully something that will end up getting sort of adjusted at some point in the future. I mean, other than that, the strike and grapple aside, I do really quite like the Maul class. I think it changes things up quite a little bit on the battlefield. You know, it's quite a slow class, but its unit damage is really intense, and I think it's particularly going to be affecting shield units and stuff, which are now a lot more vulnerable. Clustered units that can take an awful lot of damage very quickly from a Maul hero. So it does change things up quite a bit. I think I probably will end up going back to my poleaxe, but I may play it for a little bit longer, because I did quite enjoy it, and I must admit I even quite enjoyed it in a deathmatch the other night, so it can be pretty good at hero killing. So all in all, it's a fun class. Yes, it's pretty good. I think the strike and grapple needs changing, and yeah, that's pretty much my key thoughts on the Mauls. Hopefully it's been an interesting video. If it has, do let me know what you think in the comments down below. Of course, subscribe to the channel for a load more Conqueror's Blade content, and I shall see you guys all on the next video.